continuing our review leading up to our final exam. There were several times in this course that you were required to write equations or to be able to interpret from equations, not just the graphs, so the equations themselves. So let's take a look at a couple of things here. Any of the parent functions, you needed to know what transformations had happened. So for example, let's look at this one that you see right here. If you had write the function that represents a vertical shift of 7, horizontal shift to the left of 6, reflection about the x-axis from the graph of square root of x. Okay, so it's given right there, but you know how to do this. If it's reflected, that's a minus sign. Okay, how do I move something to the left by 6? Excuse me, to the left by 6 is x plus 6, and then how do I move it up by 7? That is a plus 7 on the end of that. Okay, and then we did the same thing with polynomials. So describe the transformation that gets me from f of x to g of x. First thing I notice is that there's a negative sign in front of one of them, so it's been reflected. And then the vertical shift, okay? So let's look and see from a vertical shift from f of x to g of x. It looks like this is wrong. So in this case, it looks like it has moved down 5, so down 5. And then the horizontal shift, it looks like x plus 3 turned into x plus 7. So I added 4, negative 4 added 4, so I added 4 to each of those. So plus 4 means I'm shifting 4 to which direction? That is the left. Okay, so there was a minor correction on that page. And then we did the same thing with exponential functions. So suppose you started out with 9 to the x. What would represent a reflection about the y-axis? Remember, that's different than the x-axis. Okay, so reflect about the y-axis. So I'm going to have g of x equal 9 to the, I'm going to have a minus, and then it looks like I'm moving it to the 10 to the right. The way I move things to the right is going to be a minus 10, and then I'm shifting it up by the square root of 7, okay? And then in all of these exponentials, you know that the horizontal asymptote is going to be the line y equal square root of 7, whatever that number is that is out there. So let's practice some of these. Write the equation of the function formed by translating the absolute value of x. Okay, so I'm going to look at, I'm trying to create a function f of x, and I am shifting it to the right by 5 and down by 1. So the way I go to the right by 5, that is going to be minus 5. And to go down by 1, it's just down 1. Give the function form by reflecting x to the 2/3 about the x-axis and shifting to the left by 4. So f of x equal x. The way I go to the left by 4 is just plus 4. And then reflecting it about the x-axis, there is a negative in front of that. Give g of x, which is formed by reflecting f of x about the x and y axis. So g of x equal, if I put a negative in front, that reflects it about the x-axis, okay? And then to reflect it about the y-axis, I'm going to have a negative in front of my exponent. So that has been reflected about the x and the y-axis. What equation is formed when I translate x squared to the right 4 and down 1? So x squared, how do I translate that? 4 to the right, that's going to be minus 4, and then down 1. Give the polynomial g of x, which is formed by reflecting this polynomial f about the x-axis and moving it to the right by 1. So g of x equal negative, okay? To move something to the right by 1, that just means I have to do a minus 1 in every one of those terms. And let me back up. This already has a negative sign in front of it, so to reflect this about the axis, it's going to have a positive sign. and then I'm going to have x minus 1, and then it looks like I'm going to have x and x plus 2. Okay, remember, subtracting 1 moves it to the right. What's the equation formed by shifting f of x, this polynomial, to the left by 6? Okay, to shift this to the left by 6, I'm going to get a new polynomial, 3. Okay, to go to the left, remember that's x plus 6 plus x plus 6 minus 3. That's shifting that entire polynomial, replacing all the x's with x plus 6's. That moved it to the left 6 spaces. Give the equation resulting from reflecting f of x about both axes and shifting the graph left 1 and down 1. Okay, so I'm going to come up with a new function, okay, to reflect it about both axes. So I'm going to have a negative 2, and then I'm going to have a negative x. Okay, how do I shift it to the left 1? Going to the left is a plus 1, okay, and then to shift this graph down 1, that means I have to subtract 1 from that number. So 1 minus 1, and there we are. So that's the reflection of reflected about both axes to the left 1 and down 1. Give the equation resulting from reflecting g of x about the x-axis and shifting the graph up 2 and to the right 4. So I'm going to come up with a function. If I reflect it about the x-axis, the sign changes, okay? And then how do I go to the right 4? Okay, so to go to the right 4 is going to be minus 4. So 1 minus 4 is going to be a minus 3. And then how do I go up 2? That is simply a plus 2 on the end of that. Okay, continuing this, we're giving you two functions, f and g. You describe the transformation that takes you from f to g, okay? So if I look at it, going from f to g, it's been reflected about the x-axis. Did it move horizontally? Okay, under the square root, I had an x plus 1. On g, I have an x, so it looks like I subtracted 1, okay? So remember, a minus 1 moves me to the left. So this is, moves me to the right. A minus 1 moved me to the right, so this will move to the right 1, and then it looks like this 1 on the outside moved me up with a vertical shift. How did I get from f to g? Okay, if I look at it, they both have minus signs in front, so it was not reflected about the x-axis. Did the exponent change minus signs? No, it was not reflected about the y-axis. And then what happened? The x became an x minus 1. Minus 1 moves me to the right. And then the vertical shift was 1 down. So if I look at the next one, was it reflected? I see negatives in front of both of them. It was not reflected. Did it move left or right? So it looks like that x minus 1 became an x. So if I add 1 to both of those, that accounts for what happened. So remember, if we add 1, that is shifting us 1 to the left, and the vertical shift looks like it is 3 up. Okay, these start to wear on you after a while, so maybe you have to take a break, but let's keep moving on. Absolute value. To get from f to g, it was reflected, okay? The x plus 1 became an x plus 6. That means I added 5. Adding 5 is a way of moving it 5 to the left. Vertical shift. It went from 1 to negative 5. So that is a shift downward of 6. How do I get from f to g? I see a negative in front of the entire equation. That's a reflection about the x-axis. It looks like my exponents went from positive to negative. That's a reflection about the y-axis. I see that plus 2 is a shift of 2 to the left. I went from plus 1 to minus 1. That's a shift of 2 units down. Okay, let's see the polynomial that I have here. Has it been reflected about the x-axis? All the signs are the same, so no. Horizontal shift. It looks like my x's all became x minus 1. Minus 1 is another way of moving me 1 unit to the right. The vertical shift, I had a +1 on F. I've got a +6 on G. That moves it up by 5. And the last one here, cube root. So has it been reflected about the x-axis? Yes. Horizontal shift. The x-1 became an x-3. That means I had to subtract 2. -2 is another way of moving me 2 units to the right. And did it move vertically? Yes, it looks like it went up by 3 units. Okay, so this is the section of information, like graphically writing equations or looking at equation shifts for everything we did: parent functions, polynomials, and exponentials.